Good whenever this is. Not legal advice. Hope everybody is well. It's late on a Friday. Haven't done anything this week. Well, I've done lots of stuff this week, but nothing that I haven't done a video this week for the first time in quite some time. So I wanted to do one tonight. Briefly, not legal advice, of course. Like, subscribe, share, and please let your dogs watch this. So, I heard that two antennas got married. The ceremony was but the reception was fantastic. Anyway, wanted to talk about quickly about three things: the new short sale regulations, which take effect in about 94 years, the new share lending regulations that take place in about 36 years. Of course, I'm exaggerating, and the fact that Mr. JR and I have finally made it. I'll get that. That'll be the end regarding finger motion. So, what's interesting, because I'm going to start with finger motion. What's interesting is finger motion. I've mentioned it a couple times. Uh, it's at an interesting spot to be watched next week. We shall see. But what was interesting is that JR and I, who had been left off the list last week of the Great 18, who are supposedly the promoters and get paid, we missed it. But some guy today, and I really appreciate the nice remark, called us retards, both JR and I. So I appreciate it. I feel included. I feel whole and happy now. We're not been excluded and we're taken seriously. Anyway, obviously we're not promoters. We don't get paid, but so be it. And it'll be interesting to see what happens to finger motion next week. JR and I are doing a live stream Monday night. So Monday might be an interesting day. And we have talked about the fact that we may get additional shills that'll come in over the weekend. I think Finger Motion released earnings today. I believe they do have cash on hand, and also they can obviously raise cash. And their revenue and was up. So we'll see long term, and we'll see how it impacts the stock price. Obviously, not financial advice, but it was interesting, and we'll see next week. So, two other quick things. SEC passed apparently passed some new regulations. Is that in response to all the hubbub and short sale stuff? Yes, I believe it is. Is it perhaps arising out of the MMTLP situation? Perhaps it is. So there's two of them, and I'm going to briefly talk about them because JR and I will talk about it in depth on Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Please join us. And we're also going to be talking about your favorite cartoon bananas additionally. But anyway, as to the short sale rule, which requires some monthly disclosure of short positions, although we don't know if that disclosure will go to the public too, but let's assume it's to the SEC at least, or FINRA. And the alternative or the secondary rule that's been placed is the share lending rule, which will require some type of disclosure of share lending positions within minutes or the end of trading of that same day. So, and those are designed purportedly to garner more transparency in the market. And perhaps they do, but they don't have a start date for quite some time. I think, for example, the short sale regulation may not be effective for at least 18 months. So you have to take that into account. You have to take into account that maybe Gary Gensler and the SEC are trying to cover themselves by generating very general regulations that may have impact or may not. So here's my primary concern. As we have seen, sometimes it's not the regulations. We had Reg Show, and has that stopped shorting? No, it has not. So my concern is not the regulations themselves. So if in fact there's disclosure requirements as to short positions and disclosure requirements as to share lending, and again, share lending is I'll use Fidelity as an example. So what they do is they lend out shares to short positions. They pay the client, their shareholder who has a conflicted position to Fidelity. They pay them a portion of the interest they get for lending out shares. And if the stock is in big demand, the share interest rate is substantially higher. And generally, the broker dealer will keep a large percentage of the interest rate. I know, for example, I believe today, Fngr Motion, the interest rate was somewhere in the area of 120%, something like that, the interest rate to borrow for short purposes. But I believe they're paying their customers something on the order of in the 20% for share lending. But anyway, obviously that's a conflicted position. The broker dealers acting contrary to the interest and benefit of its own clients, etc. So, what I find interesting about the short sale rule and the share lending disclosure requirement is until we find out, one, whether they're going to enforce these rules and when they will enforce these rules. That's number one, because we have seen over time that one problem here is a lack of enforcement. But number two, and as equally important as number one, perhaps even more so, is what are the penalties are going to be? So if someone doesn't comply, they don't disclose their short positions, they don't disclose their share lending positions. If they're fined $7.46, is that going to really make a difference? If their license is taken away, that would. So we need to know what the penalties are going to be, who's going to enforce it, and when they're going to enforce it. And if it's just window dressing nonsense, we need to disclose that too. And I'm skeptical, just to be honest. I'm skeptical that the SEC is just trying to take the heat off them and FINRA by creating these rules and regulations that won't be even in effect for a couple of years. And maybe at that point in time, Gary Gensler may not even be the SEC commissioner or head of the SEC. So those are my thoughts. The regulations sound transparent, but it's really in the details. Will they be enforced? And will there be real penalties? And again, to the gentleman who called Mr. JR and I retards, thank you very much. Appreciate the remarks and the appropriate consideration. To everybody else, have a great evening. JR and I will be talking about these regulations and other things Monday night at 8. We'll see you then. Take care. Everybody be well. Have a great weekend. Be safe. Take care.